The time has come.
I like that.
The time is now for Victoria Stillwell's Positively Podcast. She's a world-renowned dog trainer.
Seen enough dogs today, have you?
She's the host of It's Me or the Dog.
I'm coming to train you.
Along with co-host Holly Furfer.
You don't play around with that name, do you?
I am a fan of sweaty balls.
She's Victoria Stillwell, and she's ready to go.
This is a lovely way to start the day.
You get the busy bee. I need to trim her whiskers.
I see some poo here.
I feel a little bit better now because I'm the only one who usually feels stupid during the podcast.
Now, let's head to the studio and get this Positively Podcast started.
We are back for another podcast, and today we are going to be talking about aggressive dogs. I am so excited for this episode. Holly, how are you?
Hanging in there. I am all good. Wearing, sweatshirts still because here we are. It's cold out, but my aggressive dog. You know that I've had. I don't know. I guess you would know him better than anybody, but I don't know if you would say aggressive, but he's reactive. But he comes across as aggressive. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. He's mellowed because he's old now. So in these colder days, I just get on his dog bed with him, even though it annoys him, and we snuggle. His body temperature is better than mine. So yes. How are you?
Do you know what? I'm good. We're hanging in there. It is very, very strange, right now back in the UK with a lockdown and here too with things so uncertain. But we're just, our dogs are keeping us going. They are a pleasure and a delight to work with. I'm still doing a lot of rescue work, and we do have a huge problem here because, like in the UK that is happening right now, pandemic puppies that were bought in the pandemic when the pandemic started last year, the shelters are now seeing many of those returned as they have become more adolescent dogs. So that's really sad, but not surprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. It's like Christmas, or the holidays when people get, a dog for Christmas, or you get a bunny for Easter. And that's the thing. It's cute and it's a novelty when you get it, but then it's a lifetime commitment. And I think a lot of people aren't going in with that. And it's unfortunate that people, get a stuffed animal or foster. And that way you have a dog for a certain period of time and it's not a lifetime commitment. Help relieve the shelters and foster if you're not ready to commit. I totally understand that. And it's tough. I mean, and it is tough too, because a lot of people may have gone in with the best intentions. We're still in the throes of this pandemic. The economy is not great. We've had a lot going on in our political world. A lot of people have lost their jobs still. And they thought they could take care of an animal and they find that they can't. And that's also sad. And it's really difficult this time, at this time.
And what we're seeing here is that a lot of people, as you said, they're not just losing their jobs, they're losing their homes too. So then we're finding, especially down in the south of Atlanta, a lot of animals that have been abandoned. And the shelters are becoming full again because at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody wanted to adopt a dog. Everybody wanted to foster a dog. So that was fantastic. But what we're seeing now is the shelters filling up again with families that are unable to look after their animals. And that's where Wonder Dogs and other organizations come in to try and relieve that pressure. So, I mean, it's a difficult world right now, but I just thank God for our dogs. I thank God for our families and for our friends, because we all need each other right now for support. And I'm also really glad that we can do this podcast as well to give great information to all of the dog lovers out there. And today is especially important because
I was going to. Oh, no, I was just going to say, because, what's interesting is that we have time now to work with our dogs, too. We're home. We're with them a lot. So for those who do have an issue with an aggressive dog or want to adopt a dog who might be aggressive because of the situation they were in the shelter, it's just too much. Now's a good time to be able to work through that with our amazing guest today.
Michael Shikashio, we are so pleased to have you here. You are just exceptional. I have a lot of my students from the Victoria Stillwell Academy. A lot of our graduates go on to take your courses. You are a mine of information about aggressive dogs. Welcome to the podcast. please we are going to ask you so many questions. So get ready. And I know we're going to have lots of viewers that, because I'm telling you, when I put a call out or when I start talking about aggression, I mean, I just get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions. So I know there are going to be a lot of viewers that are going to be very interested in what you have to say. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here because, as you had mentioned, we share a lot of mutual students, and I'm really impressed with the students that come out of your academy and the knowledge they have. So it's so nice to have this cross-pollination between us and the rest of the industry, and just helping all of these dogs through education, educating trainers, educating pet owners. So this is really exciting for me.
Mike, let me start by asking you, what is an aggressive dog? Because I know that there's many. I have a reactive dog, but not maybe necessarily aggressive. So talk about what is an aggressive dog, if you would.
That's such a great question, Holly. It's one I get a lot, and I advertise. Like, the name of my website is aptly named aggressivedog.com, but I actually don't come out and label any dog aggressive, because what they're displaying is aggressive behaviors. But there's no dog that's necessarily I want to label as aggressive, because there's dogs that are reactive. People will label them reactive or aggressive, or have other euphemisms for their dog's behavior. But it's really just behavior that we want to pay attention to. So if a dog is barking and lunging at another dog on leash, some might label that as aggressive, some might label it as reactive. I look at it as the dog is barking and lunging at another dog on leash. Well, why do I think they're doing that? And what can I do to help the dog? And what can I teach the dog to do instead of barking and lunging on leash? And so I typically shy or kind of lean away from labeling any dogs with any kind of term.
I love that. We do teach at the academy, and it's really hard not to judge. It's really hard not to make judgments and look at your dog's behavior and say, oh, my dog is being aggressive. Or my dog is happy. My dog is excited. We put labels on dogs, where at the academy, we try sort of break that down, and we teach our students to look at behavior first. Look at behavior first. Look at what the dog is actually doing rather than putting a label to it.
So, Mike, what are some of the common reasons a dog might have those kind of reactions, whether it's barking and lunging at another dog on a leash, at a car going by, at the doorbell, somebody coming to the door?
The vast majority of the time, it's fear-based behavior. In the work that I deal with, it's most of the dogs are just fearful, or they have some apprehension or anxiety about that particular stimulus. And we have to recognize that, because if we use methods that are going to try to suppress that behavior, we're not addressing the dog's fear or discomfort or anxiety or stress about that particular stimulus. So it's really important to focus on kind of the underlying reason for the dog's behavior in the first place. There's other underlying motivations. Dogs will be dogs in terms of what we've purpose-bred them to do in many cases. So some of the behaviors are not necessarily fear-based. Sometimes you have dogs that are guarding a particular object, guarding property, guarding people. Sometimes it's frustration based. Maybe they can't get to or away from something, and we're restricting that by a leash or a fence. So there's different motivations, but by far most of the cases I see are fear based, and also pain based, which I should say, or pain or discomfort medically issue, which is really important to make sure you assess, because a lot of those dogs suffer this sort of double whammy. They get the punishment because they're being aggressive, and they're in pain. And so somebody's punishing them when they're in pain, and they're just trying to communicate that they're feeling uncomfortable or in pain. So that's why it's very, very important to make sure a proper assessment is made in these cases.
I do want to explore that a little bit as we go through this podcast, the relationship between aggressive behavior and pain. You will be talking about handling dogs at the Dog Behavior Conference. For those of you who haven't registered yet, it's April the 16th to the 18th. Michael Shikashio will be speaking at the conference about handling aggressive dogs, or dogs that have aggressive behavior. How do you handle them? How are you safe around them? Very important subject. But just if we could just touch on that before we go into why. I do a lot of rescue work. We have a lot of dogs that are very fearful. We have a lot of dogs that are, quite unsocialized. How does somebody approach a dog that is on the end of a chain, that is barking and lunging at them? How does somebody, if they are volunteering or working at a shelter and they have a dog that is exploding at them in the kennel run, how do they handle a dog like that?
Great question, Victoria. So, well, the first thing I always start with is carefully and safely. That's the thing I focus on most when I'm working with animal professionals, how to keep them safe, how to avoid bites, and then the second thing is really reducing the underlying reason for that dog's behavior. Most of the time, again, it's fear-based. They're stressed about the stimulus, they're anxious about it. And so we want to work in a way that's going to reduce that as much as possible. And one of the questions I get from my clients, if I walk into a client's home, or if I have really no other way of meeting the dog while also keeping them under threshold. So I do the best I can to make that dog as most comfortable. But even then, sometimes the dog will see me come out barking and lunging. And the first thing I do is I start tossing the dog the best treats I can find. And a lot of clients are like, well, aren't you rewarding that behavior? And I say to them, well, let me just work here and I'll show you the difference. And what I'm trying to do is change that dog's association with me, help that dog feel better about me. So it's in the way I approach, it's the way I toss the treats, the body language I use. And my approach is very cautious and calm in terms of just making that dog feel as most comfortable with me. That's my goal. It's just I want that dog to feel as safe and comfortable with me as possible. And so tossing treats to a dog is not going to make them more fearful of me. It's going to make them typically feel better about me. In vast majority of the cases, within a few minutes, or maybe take a few sessions in some cases, the dog's looking forward to my arrival because I'm the guy that's tossing treats. And so that's how I would recommend really any animal professional or anybody approaching a dog that is barking, lunging, growling, snarling, snapping. Be kind to them and show them that you're not a threat, and you can up the ante by tossing treats. Most dogs will take the treats. Some don't, but there's other methods to approach, and that can make a big difference in changing how a dog feels.
Yeah, because I come from experience, just my own dog experience, because I'm not an animal trainer or behaviorist, but I had a reactive dog, we'll say, who was very sweet, but once he got out into the real world, outside, started barking and chasing at cars. Then it was bicycles. Then it was kids on, motor scooters. And then it was people walking, and then forget other dogs. Like that was just, he would lose his mind. So he was comfortable with me. But so in a situation like that, where I know that he is a sweet dog, but it was like overstimulation. So he's comfortable with me. I don't have to throw him treats, and he wasn't food motivated. How do you help your dog basically get out into the world and exist?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially for my clients in the city environments. There's limited options. If their dog's barking and lunging at every little thing that goes by, it's very difficult. You have to consider the human side of the coin too. It's stressful for the human, it's stressful for the dog. And so, with all of my aggression cases, the first thing I do is I look at environment. Let's look at the environment. Let's see what we can modify and change. Do we actually need to go for those walks? So some people are so stuck on that, this whole exercise thing. A tired dog is a good dog, but there's many other ways to incorporate enrichment and exercise that don't expose the dog. It's like going out into the streets of a war zone, trying to, the dog's basically getting into battles with every single dog you walk by. And that's extremely stressful. And, because people want to focus on that exercise and tiring the dog out, but it's really can be counterintuitive. And so really looking at the environment, whether it's in the home or in your car or on a walk, we can modify that to, in most cases, to set the dog up for success. That way we can start to look at behaviors we like and reinforce those behaviors. And a lot of the times the dogs aren't food motivated or not taking food because they're over threshold, they're barking and lunging. The last thing they're thinking about is treats. We can set the stage for success by modifying the environment. So let's get further away from those things where you are going to take treats. And now I can reinforce you for desirable behaviors around the thing that you're having issues with, but I'm going to keep you safe enough where you don't feel the need to react at that. And the beauty of that is that you get a nice conditioned association as well in most cases. The dog starts to learn that, wait a second, that guy is like 50 yards away. Now I don't have to worry about him. And I'm seeing him. And every time a guy shows up, I'm getting treats. Okay, this isn't so bad. And so look at environment first. Really important that's the first thing you want to focus on is the environment.
When you, this kind of the elephant in the room, that when you're working with a dog and you're only using food, or you kind of get labeled as, oh, you're just sort of that that's all you do. You're a positive trainer, right? You're just putting food in front of a dog's face. That's not really training the dog. That's just bribery. How effective is food as a motivator when you're working with a dog that has aggressive behavior? And what happens if food is not motivating, if the dog is not taking food? What do you do then?
It's such a good question, because I get that question a lot. Like, what do I do with the dogs that don't take food? What do I do? So to give you a little bit of background, I'm what they call a crossover trainer. So I've used all the different methods growing up, and it worked to suppress the behaviors. So you get a dog that's barking and lunging. A lot of people go to that mindset of I just want my dog to stop barking and lunging or something like that. So they resort to punishment. And sure, most trainers that are good enough can get a dog to stop barking and lunging, but it doesn't change why the dog is feeling in the first place, or the reason for the behavior in the first place. And as I moved along, I realized just how counterintuitive it is to use something like punishment to try to change the behavior, because I'm not creating any new association for the dog. In fact, many times I'm making it worse. Or you get this concept like poison cues and negative associations, which is when you're pairing a particular cue or stimulus with negative outcomes. That just is so counterintuitive. It's so obvious to me now, but wasn't so obvious to me then. And that is a lot of cases when I started to switch over to, okay, let me start using food and maybe some corrections. And then I started realizing, well, the dog's not taking food. And why? Because, again, I'm not changing the dog's association the way I should be. So when I switched over to just exclusively using positive methods in most cases, that's when I realized, okay, it's because I'm not setting the stage for success. So if I have a dog that's not taking food, first thing I'm going to look at is, am I setting this dog up for success? If you're falling out of an airplane with a parachute, it doesn't matter how many $100 bills I'm giving you, right? You're not feeling safe. And the same thing can happen for dogs. I need to make them feel safe. So I need to set the stage for success. Maybe I'll put a parachute on somebody and have them jump off a 1-foot block. That's setting the stage for success. You're going to take a $100 bill then. And so the same thing for dogs. So that's when most of them will start taking food. Of course, you have to experiment. Maybe somebody's not that much into $100 bills. Maybe they're into something else that's reinforcing. So I'll play around with reinforcers. It could be play, it could be toys. And when I say play, sometimes it's just being silly without any toys. You can just be play face, whatever you do that's silly with your dog. Some dogs enjoy that. It can be play with toys. It can be tactile stimulation. Some dogs just like petting, the attention from the owner. So there's many other different types of reinforcers we can use other than food that can work just as well. And of course, you can also look at just straight desensitization, which is just gradual exposure to something without any kind of reinforcers. And you can go down to olfactory type of reinforcers using the nose. I find that works really well with like scent hounds, beagles, and things like that do really well with that. But there's many, many different options before we start to say, well, food doesn't work for my dog, so I've got to resort to something more aversive. That's 99.9% of the time. You do not have to resort to that. There's always something for motivating for a dog, or else they wouldn't be living, right?
Yeah, I say to people, your dog will eat, right? Your dog has to eat to live. So at some point, your dog will eat food. Yeah, your dog can be motivated by food. It just has to be the right environment. You use that word safety. I think it's a really important word. And with safety brings relief. And that's what I see when I certainly am working with dogs that have that are showing aggressive behavior. It's that making them feel safe, putting them in an environment where they don't feel overwhelmed. And that brings a certain amount of relief. And then when the dog feels safe and trusts you, as much as any dog can trust you, certainly when you've just met a trainer and you're just starting to work with it, then you're setting the dog up for success. I think those words are extremely important.
Yeah, safety trumps everything else. If the dog's not feeling safe, or if any animal organism's not feeling safe, the last thing they're going to think about is eating or playing. So we have to set that stage for safety and feeling comfortable and in control of the environment.
I want to take a quick break to talk to you for a minute about one of my very favorite weekends of the entire year, the Dog Behavior Conference. So for years, we hosted the Dog Behavior Conference as an in-person event in the UK. But when COVID-19 hit, we turned the conference into an online event and opened it up to the rest of the world. The end result being, it turned into a truly transformative virtual event that brings together like-minded dog people from all over the world for a weekend of learning, connecting, and inspiration. This year, I'm thrilled to have brought in over a dozen of my friends from every area of the dog world to join me as presenters. Our speakers are dog trainers, veterinary behaviorists, thought leaders, behavioral scientists, and even the world's leading psychoacoustician. Over 3 days, we'll be providing a level of content you can't find anywhere else in a really supportive, connected, inviting environment. Even though it's an online event, we're able to come together between presentations, during live Q&As with speakers, and via the DBC experts' amazing interactive discussions. The DBC is open to everybody. Behavior geeks like me, dog owners like me, dog trainers like me, dog walkers, groomers, sitters, daycare operators, rescue and shelter workers or volunteers, every other type of pet professional in the field. Because we're all constantly learning, me included. And every year I leave the DBC feeling invigorated and inspired to do more great things. So I hope you'll join us this April the 16th to 18th online for the 2021 Dog Behavior Conference. Registration is open now, and your ticket gets you full access to all 3 days of the event, plus 1 year's access to recordings of every minute of the conference. You can register now at positively.com/DBC. That's positively.com/DBC. Come join us and get inspired. Find out how to take your love of dogs to the next level. I'll see you online.
I want to touch on something that you had mentioned. It's the emotional aspect, and it makes a lot of sense, because if it's fear-based and you use aggressive tactics to try and control your dog, all you're doing is instilling more fear in them, or acknowledging that fear and reinforcing it. So that makes a lot of sense. How much of it also is on us as owners? So from my experience, my dog definitely needed exercise every day. He needed a walk. He was one of those, he's a hound, right? So he needs to get out there and explore the world. But it was very, very stressful. And it was something that I knew I had to do, but I dreaded the daily walks. I dreaded it. It was so, I was like, oh, and I would have to steel myself up for this, because holy smokes, if we were to see another dog, here we go. It's going to be crazy. I have to walk him behind a bush and try and hide him. And because he would go nuts, and people would be like, oh my God, that girl's got this killer dog, which really wasn't true. So how much of that is he feeling from me, or dogs feeling from owners? Because that anxiety was real. Even my husband looked at me and said, oh my God, you're going to have a heart attack. I'm like, I know, but I've got to take him for a walk.
So that's kind of a multiple component question there. I wanted to touch base on this sort of the fear and reinforcing that, and sort of some of the misconceptions on that, in the sense of when we're using reinforcers for dogs. So we can't reinforce fear through like using food. So we can't reinforce emotional responses. We can reinforce behavior. You ask a dog to sit, you give them a cookie, they'll sit more often in the future typically. But with fear, if we're tossing treats or comforting a fearful dog, we can't reinforce that emotion. It's again the same thing if you're falling out of an airplane with a parachute and I'm saying, don't worry, it's going to be okay, Holly. You're not going to be more fearful. I'm sure you're not going to be enjoying the experience, but it's not going to make you more fearful. So it's important to note that don't worry about reinforcing fear by using food or comfort or anything like that. And so what was the second part of that question I wanted to get to?
So language, like, is she transmitting all of her feelings down the leash?
There's actually a recent study, I forget where it's from, maybe Victoria will remember, is that how dogs are actually able to pick up on some of those fear-based pheromones from the humans, right? And that makes sense, because dogs are so intuitive with their sense and their olfactory senses. So, but I do believe that dogs can pick up on our signals, and dogs are extremely good about picking up on it. It's the social psychology aspect of it, where they're able to pick up on the very subtle signals in our facial expressions and our movement and our respiration. I see it all the time. For instance, a client that's like you, Holly, in the past with walking the dog, you start to stiffen up, or you see something coming and you're like, oh, great, here I go, here it comes. And you start to tense up on the leash, or you hold the leash a little bit tighter, or you hold your breath. I've even seen it where clients or just take a deep breath in and then that's when their dog starts to react. It basically becomes an environmental stimulus or environmental cue for the dog to start to react. So it's not like dogs are these magical mind readers, but they are really good at seeing our subtle signals and changes in, I'm sure, our scent and how we're moving and how we're talking to them. All these little subtle cues in the environment can become great predictors of something negative about to happen. So that's the beauty of video too. That's another thing I've been doing with the pandemic is all these Zoom consults and stuff. I get a lot of video from clients, and that's the beauty of it. You can play things in slow motion and pick things up that you might have not seen, if you were there in real time. So yeah, I do think dogs can pick up on our what we're doing as a basis of our emotional responses. So I don't think they're saying, oh, mom's fearful. I see what mom is doing when she typically becomes fearful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I want to put a caveat in there. Victoria fixed me and my dog. She fixed us both. We are all good. Like she knew exactly that my dog was fearful and he was afraid he was going to get beaten up. So he'd be like, very aggressive first. And so it is not food motivated. I would throw food, cheese, meat, you name it. But he just needed to be diverted, like his attention. So she helped fix me where I would walk him the other way or hide behind a bush if I had to. And it soon became okay. Or look, a puppy, totally, diverting him. So I just want you to know we were all fixed. Thank you, Vic.
It's almost like giving the dog something else to do. It's because I see in that frustration / fear that there's so much adrenaline that energy has to go somewhere. So if we can channel that energy elsewhere. We work on a desensitization protocol. We give the dog other things to do. We make the walk something that is enjoyable for both of you rather than not. But I think what you're saying, Michael, is that even before we do that, we need to take pressure off, not just the dog, but we need to take pressure off the person too. Because we are under pressure. We have to walk our dogs. We have to give them the exercise. Exercise releases pleasurable endorphins. Exercise is really good. We've got to have our dog has got to be tired, otherwise it's going to chew the house. I mean, how can we tell clients or allow our clients just to, it's okay, take pressure off. You actually don't have to walk your dog.
Absolutely. It's, Chris Pockel refers to it as a stimulus vacation. You don't have to bring them around all of those different, those triggering stimuli. There's plenty of other enrichment solutions for this. Emily Strong and Ali Bender just released that great book, Canine Enrichment. And there's so many different things that can replace a walk, especially for hounds too. They use their nose so much. And so enrichment sniffs in the backyard can replace a walk, or just around the house, hiding little treats around the house, or putting things in cardboard boxes. I mean, there's a million and one things you can do to replace walks that really are going to allow for that enrichment and exercise component while you slowly get back out into the real world. So that's something I do. I think as good trainers and behavior consultants too, we should always be able to give our clients something else to do also for them, meaning enjoyable activities they can do with their dog that's going to replace the needed exercise and enrichment. And so again, it's not that we don't want them to go for walks in the future. We're going to make it doable though. So, okay, Holly, go out in front of your driveway. You're going to walk 5 feet this way, 5 feet that way. Great job. Call it a day. Come back in. And your dog and you are successful. And then you start to expand that distance so you are feeling successful and safe, and so is your dog. So I think, again, there's so many different things to replace the walk.
When I started as a trainer, just not so much when I started as a trainer. Well, I was a little bit of a crossover trainer like you, Mike, when I first started, because that's how I learned. And I was very much more pack theory as well, because I followed my mentor, who was very much into pack theory and rank and everything. And even when I started It's Me or the Dog, I was very much that way. But one of the things that I noticed as I started working with more and more dogs that were really fearful, especially on leash, was the fact that that they needed an action, so that, you'll be in my beginning episodes, you'll see me that when I'm working with reactive dogs, that I'm making them sit and look at me and turn their back on the thing that they fear, and that's fine for some dogs, but then it works, but then realizing that actually I'm asking my dog to turn its back on something that it fears. That is counterproductive. That is just making the situation worse. So what do people do? Are we going to make our dogs sit and stay and look at us, or sit and look at, or are we going to do an action? What happens when that other stimulus that the dog is frightened of or feels threatened by goes past? What are we actually doing?
That's such a good point you're making, because it's actually an analogy I use when I teach my students, or I'm teaching a seminar. Is I'll say, okay, everybody look at me, watch me. So it's that cue that we used to use. Watch me, watch me. There's a guy with a gun right behind you, but don't turn around and look. Watch me. And so I said, watch me. So it's the same thing. If we ask our dogs to completely ignore the stimulus, it doesn't allow them to feel safe about it. So I definitely allow dogs to look at the thing that they have a problem with, but I do it again in a way that all they're going to do is look, rather than bark, lunge, or do anything that I don't want them to do in my mind. I want them to just notice, and I'm going to reinforce that behavior. You look at the thing, great. Here's a cookie. All right, and we can increase distance. I'm going to keep distance to keep you safe. And that's the other part of the equation too. I think it's important that, we do give our dogs direction in some cases, especially certain breeds. I mean, we've purpose bred certain breeds to really look for our direction. Gun dogs, herding dogs, for instance. So if we don't give them that direction, if you think about that anxiety component that sneaks in there too, because what we've done for many generations in certain breeds is to look for that, is to kind of bring out that aspect of the dog looking for direction from the owner or the person handling them. And if we don't do that, the dog's like, what do I do here? I guess I'll just react at that thing. Oh wait, is that a squirrel? And then next thing you know, the dog's just constantly in the state of just trying to determine what to do next. So I think it can be really helpful to give the dog direction, but do it in a way the dog's going to feel safe. Okay, come on over here. You can still look at this stimulus. We're going to hang back. You can see that thing, learn it's safe. I'm going to keep you safe because you can trust me, because every time something scary comes around, I'm going to bring you away, and I'm not going to put you in a position that you're going to feel stressed, anxious, or fearful of that thing. And we'll gradually get closer over time on your, we're going to allow you to control that, but we're going to try to get a little closer each time to these particular stimuli, so that you're, again, feeling safe through the whole process. Really, really important.
Yeah, I definitely think it's safety, because, with my dog, one of the things, and Vic taught me, is we would stop and we would sit, and I would actually get down next to him. So I was eye to eye with him. My face was right next to him. I would kind of put my arms around him. I would talk to him, and knowing that, hey, I'm right here with you, that he didn't feel vulnerable, that I gotcha. I physically gotcha, and I emotionally got you. And that definitely helped. And knowing about all of this, shelter dogs, oftentimes, they say, oh, this is an aggressive dog. And those are the dogs that don't get adopted. But is there a situation where it's just too much stimulus? And if you get that dog out of the shelter and get them home, you can see they're not really an aggressive dog. Or if a volunteer could take it for a walk, get it away from all that, it's not really a reactive dog. What can we do to make sure that these dogs don't get overlooked and lost in shelters?
That's such an excellent question, a well-timed one too, because, again, Victoria was mentioning how a lot of dogs were all adopted out of the shelters, and now a lot of them are just seeing a lot of dogs going back, or the puppies now getting into adolescence, getting surrendered, which is really a shame. It's nice to see all these dogs get adopted out, but again, the behavior problems start to creep up. And what's really happening in there is it's so environmental. All organisms, and humans and animals, are a product of their environment. And so if we have a dog in a shelter environment, it's going to be a much different dog. If we think about it, most of us are in our own little shelter environments right now, and think about how our behavior is changing, how stressed we're getting, not being able to get out. And then we're asking our dogs to be in a much smaller space, often colder and cramped, and not necessarily have their Netflix or anything like that. They're going to be in much more stressed states than we are. So we have to give them that opportunity. We have to get them out, and everybody's suffering from this sort of confinement and not having socialization and being able to get out. And so I think humans can start to understand what some of the shelter dogs are going through. So once we change that environment, you often see changes in behavior as well.
I truly see that this pandemic has made us understand the experiences of our dogs just a little bit more, a little bit more. This confinement. I mean, Holly and I mean, I know you, Mike, as well. I'm sure travel the world. You know, we're filming and doing all of our seminars and things like that, and we can't do that now. And kind of how confining that is, even just just personally, it is.
Yeah, like I know, going for a walk was a chore with my dog. Now I'm like, you want to go for another walk? He's like, really? I just came back like 30 minutes ago. I just want to get out of the house. Like, I understand why walks are so important for all of us mentally. But I also want to ask you about puppies, right? So is there a way, because I mean, some dogs, like my dog, I got him at 11 weeks old and he was in a, very calm, quiet environment, and he became this reactive dog. So it wasn't anything that happened in his past that we know of. I mean, he was the runt of the litter, so maybe stuff happened in those first 11 weeks. But is there a way to sort of work with puppies so that they don't become reactive or aggressive or fearful or, any of those things?
Really good questions. Again, well timed because of all these pandemic puppies. It really is about not going with a cookie cutter approach with puppies. It's really going at their speed, determining what's best for that particular puppy, because some puppies have a propensity. They might have a fearful propensity or a temperament. And I'm putting that in air quotes, temperament. They have this, you might have puppies that are really confident. They're just happy romping around in the puppy class and everything's fine to them in the world. And you have some puppies that are on the opposite end of the coin, where they're going to be more likely to be startled by something. So we have to go at the puppy speed. And that's where some education comes in, is being able to recognize body language and when a puppy is maybe having a difficult time somewhere and being their advocate. It amazes me that sometimes we go to a puppy class, you see like one hiding underneath the chair and all the other dogs are kind of just pouncing on it and really bullying that puppy. And we would never allow the same thing to happen to, our child or anything like that. So it's the same for puppies. We got to really just go with the pace of the puppy. And, gradual exposure to different stimuli. It doesn't have to be like you take the puppy and pass it around to everybody in class. Maybe the puppy can sit back and watch that happening with other puppies, or you go out in your car and the puppy can watch the things going by and feel safe about it and eventually go out. Some puppies need that slower acclimation and socialization than some other puppies that can just jump out of the car and be like, hey, party, and it's fine for them.
Yeah, sometimes puppies need that time to build resilience. I actually love a video that you have on your website, Mike, that is talks about how to create a resource garden. And I love your videos. And for everybody, you have to go to Mike's website because he's got some great videos on there about how to introduce your dog to a muzzle, for example, but also this great video of how to create a resource garden. And it's all about, do put your hand into your dog's food bowl when your dog is eating. Yeah, do pet your dog when your dog is eating. Like, why do we have this feeling that if we do that, then we're going to, then our dogs are not going to be resource guarders?
Yeah, it's a bad dog training advice by Google.
Fabulous.
You've traveled around too, and I've heard some really strange ones. People peeing on their dog's toys or spitting in the dog's food bowl, and really these just off the wall strange things that get passed down by tradition, I guess. But yeah, I don't advocate for either of those things.
Oh my word. What do you think about multiple dogs in a household? So I had here's my reactive dog, who's my stressed, fearful dog. But then I had another dog in the house who was so relaxed and laid back, and she loved everybody, and she'd be the first one there. We called her, she had a problem with her liquor. She just wanted to be friends with everybody. She would immediately see you and then give you her belly. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that helped my dog a little bit because he kind of watched her. He stayed back. There's no way he was going to go where she went, but that he kind of realized, okay, well, they're not doing anything bad to her, so maybe I don't need to jump on that. Could that help, or could it make things worse for a dog?
It depends, as they say. It depends on the dogs. There is something called social facilitation in dogs. There's other terms, emotional or behavioral contagion, where dogs will see other dogs doing something and kind of follow suit
Yeah.
or feel confident. I've actually used that. In some cases, I've had fearful dogs, and I know that their housemate is very confident and happy to greet people. And they see their housemate coming out and greeting me and being all happy, and then all of a sudden they come over and they're like, okay, if he says okay, must be okay. So it can be helpful in some cases. In some cases it makes no difference. The dog's still like, I could care less if Fido says it's fine, I still am going to stay away. And you have to be careful too, like some people get a second dog for separation anxiety cases. It may help in some cases, but a lot of cases it doesn't. So I don't advocate for getting a second dog just to help the first dog. Could it be helpful? Sure, but not. I wouldn't use it as a sole reason for getting a second dog, because you can actually run into some issues too if the dogs don't get along, or some of the other problems that can happen.
Before we end, I'm sorry, Holly, what were you going to say?
I love two dogs. I'm all about the balance of vibrations. Right? Like, I think there should be two of everything because I like them. So that's, crazy me, but yes.
Before, because we're coming to the end of this podcast, but I could just talk to you for hours. I really could. I wanted to revisit what you had mentioned at the beginning, and the relationship between aggressive behavior and pain, which I believe goes much underdiagnosed.
It's significantly underdiagnosed, and one of the reasons why is dogs aren't able to say, ouch, my shoulder hurts, or this is tender today. We have to see that through body language and through their behavior, and it's not always obvious. You have to really know what you're looking for. And in fact, I always recommend, if it's maybe the dog's been to a general veterinarian, that they might look to a specialist, someone that can really recognize pain, because we ask a lot of veterinarians, right? We ask them to be, general. It's like asking your doctor to be a general doctor, but then also be a psychiatrist. But oh, by the way, can you be a neurologist today and a heart specialist? And so, shout out to all the vets out there. But it can be difficult to diagnose pain at the micro levels, and sometimes that can be a significant contributing factor to aggression. The dog, you often see it in the context of somebody petting the dog, the owner petting the dog, or somebody petting the dog, and all of a sudden the dog bites them or shows aggressive behavior. It can even happen when that person is moving away, and you get a lot of confused owners too. They're like, I don't get it. He came over nuzzling my hand or nudging my hand. He wanted to be pet, so I started petting him, and then about 10 seconds later he bit me. And it's the same thing like somebody gets a deep tissue massage. You could be sore and somebody's like digging out that knot for you, but if they keep doing that for 20 minutes, you're going to be like, ouch, okay, that's enough. Dogs unfortunately communicate that differently, and sometimes it's with a growl or something else subtle that maybe the owner's not noticing. And so there's many different types of underlying pain issues and causes for pain that can contribute to aggressive behavior. So anybody who's experiencing those issues where a dog is displaying aggressive behavior during any kind of handling, whether it's petting or putting on a harness or taking a collar off or grooming, or even approaching the dog when they're laying down, or even in some cases asking the dog to get up from somewhere, so coming off a dog bed or off the owner's bed, or growling when you approach the bed. Sometimes that can be resource guarding, but sometimes it could be pain issues because the dog's just like, I don't want to move because I'm in pain. So important to work as a team with a veterinarian to ensure that's properly diagnosed.
Well, thank you so much for just giving us so much advice, and for everything that you do to help people with dogs that are showing aggressive behavior. And I know that our listeners will be really excited to hear that you are going to be speaking about handling and about safe handling at the conference, April the 16th to the 18th. And I just want to say to listeners out there that if you cannot be, and this is a 3-day conference, but if you can't be there live, don't worry. We will be there live, but don't worry, because you will have access. If you register, you will have access to all of our speakers and their presentations, the speakers' presentations, I should say, for a year afterwards. So we really do encourage you to come there and to learn more. But Michael, if people want to learn more and obviously do your courses, because not only do you do consultations for regular dog lovers, but you also do courses for people that like my graduates that have a foundational course, but then maybe want to learn a bit more about aggression or specialize in aggressive behavior. Where would people go?
Sure. It's easy to remember. It's aggressivedog.com, and they're going to look at the For Professionals tab, which lists all courses and webinars, podcast as well. The Bitey End of the Dog is
I
what
love
I've
the
been enjoying.
podcast. I was listening to the podcast that you did with Jim Crosby today. I love that podcast. Everybody needs to go to your podcast.
Yeah, Jim is great. He's always got something interesting to say. I wouldn't recommend reading or listening to anything he has to say while eating lunch, but he's fascinating to listen to.
Well, thank you. I just have to say, as a dog owner, not a trainer or behaviorist, it is such great information. And what you do is so important for somebody like me who has a dog like that. It gives me confidence, it gives me hope, and it makes me realize that, you know what, even dogs, I worry about dogs like my dog in a shelter, because I always say if he was in a shelter the way he was as an adult, he would never have gotten adopted. They would, I think he would have been euthanized. There's no way. And it breaks my heart because I know what a wonderful dog he is. So thank you. What you're doing is so important, not only just for the dogs, but for all of us owners as well.
Wow, thank you.
That's it. We have come to the end of our podcast again. Just another corker, as my father used to say. What a corker this was. Huh? A corker. C-O-R-K-E-R. Have you not heard of that expression?
C-O what?
C-O-R-K-E-R.
Corker.
Corker.
Mike,
it's when something's
First
really
time.
good. It's when do you know what? I've been married to my husband now we've been together now for 22 years, and I still come up with British words that he's never heard before. And he looks at me and goes, what did you say? Never heard. So, okay, we just found another word. Corker. Yeah, it's like, wow, that was awesome. That's
amazing what we learned on your podcast, Victoria.
There you go. It's not just about dogs.
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike. And Holly, I guess I'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Victoria Stilwell's Positively Podcast. For more information, visit positively.com. Get connected on Facebook and YouTube as Victoria Stilwell, or follow her on Twitter at Victoria S. Be sure to tune in next time as Victoria helps to change dogs' lives positively.